What the hell happened to Michael Smith? Just 2 years ago, he was on top of the world, a newly crowned world champion, ranked #1, and finally, silencing every critic who said he'd never win the big one. But now, he's vanished from the top 20, missed nearly every major tournament this season, and fans are starting to ask if we're watching one of the fastest downfalls in darts history. How does a player go from peak performance to complete obscurity in less than 24 months? The answer is messier and more painful than anyone expected. For years, Michael Smith was darts' most frustrating paradox, the player with all the talent in the world, but none of the luck when it mattered most. He made final after final, only to walk away empty-handed. The nickname Bully Boy followed him, but for a long time the darts world saw him more as the bullied. A nearly man, a choker, a player destined to come close but never conquer. But on January 3rd, 2023, everything changed. It wasn't just that he won the World Championship, it was how he won. Facing off against Michael van Gerwen, one of the sport's most dominant forces, Smith didn't just hold his nerve, and he made history. That now legendary nine-darter, it was the kind of moment you'd think was scripted. Van Gerwen missed his own nine-darter by a whisker, and in the very next visit, Smith stepped up and hit it. The crowd lost its mind. Commentators couldn't believe what they were watching. It wasn't just a leg of darts, it was a legacy-defining moment in real time. That win marked his first world title, and it pushed him to the #1 spot in the PDC rankings. He had finally broken through the wall that had stopped him for so long. No more what-ifs, no more maybe next year. Michael Smith was the world champion. He was the man. Fans were convinced we were entering the Smith era, a new king at the top of the sport. He was being booked for every major event. Interviews, sponsorships, media buzz, it was all there. Even his doubters started calling him the most dangerous player in the game. His throw looked effortless, his confidence was peaking, and for the first time in his career, it felt like the pressure had finally lifted. But while the world was celebrating his breakthrough, something was already starting to crack beneath the surface. After reaching the top, Michael Smith seemed untouchable. But just months later, the cracks began to show, and they weren't small. It started subtly, a few shaky performances, unexpected losses in early rounds, nothing that screamed disaster at first. But then came the 2025 World Championship, the one where he was supposed to prove the critics wrong all over again. Instead, he bombed out in the second round. His opponent? Kevin Dowitz. A solid player, sure, but not someone most people expected to eliminate the reigning world champion. The match wasn't just a loss, it was a collapse. Missed doubles, sloppy finishes, and body language that screamed frustration. It wasn't the confident, fire-powered Michael Smith fans had rallied behind a year earlier. It was a version of him we hadn't seen in a long time, hesitant, flat, unsure. And the rankings? They started to spiral. The PDC system runs on a 2-year rolling format. That means every result or failure affects a player's standing. So while other top players were picking up points and titles, Smith had nothing to fall back on. With his 2023 results slowly expiring and new wins failing to come in, he dropped, fast, from #1 to outside the top 20 in less than 2 years. For someone who had waited a lifetime to reach the peak, the fall wasn't just steep, it was sudden. And fans started asking the question no one ever thought they'd ask. Was Michael Smith just a one-season wonder? But the truth behind his downfall wasn't just about poor form. There were deeper problems hiding in the background, and they were about to hit hard. As the losses piled up, fans and pundits speculated. Was it just a slump? Was he burned out? But behind the scenes, something more serious was going on. Something that no amount of practice or confidence could fix. Michael Smith was battling pain. Real, physical pain. First, it was his throwing hand. A brutal case of arthritis had started flaring up, a condition that makes precision and consistency almost impossible. For a darts player, that's like a pianist losing feeling in their fingers. Every throw hurt. Every session became a mental and physical grind. But Smith, never one to complain publicly, kept pushing through, trying to fight off what his body was clearly screaming at him to stop. Then, if that wasn't enough, disaster struck again. He was involved in a freak e-scooter accident that injured his shoulder. Not career-ending, but enough to throw off everything. His rhythm, his release, his confidence. It was one of those weird, unlucky moments that felt like insult on top of injury. Just when he needed a comeback, his body betrayed him again. The timing couldn't have been worse. Smith was trying to defend a ranking, prove himself again on the big stage, and silence the growing doubts. But instead, he was stuck nursing injuries that quietly kept him off the ocean. And while other players were racking up appearances and points, Michael Smith was slipping further behind, both physically and in the standings. But it wasn't just about pain. What came next would sting even more than the injuries, because it wasn't just about how he played, it was about where he wasn't showing up at all. For a former world champion, missing one major tournament might raise eyebrows. Missing several? That sets off alarm bells. In 2025, Smith failed to qualify for the World Match Play, an event he'd appeared in for over a decade. It was the first time in 13 years he didn't make the cut. Fans were stunned, but the blows kept coming. He was left out of the Premier League, no invite to the World Series. One by one, the big stages were slipping away, and so was the spotlight. Not long ago, he was the headliner, the showstopper, the name on every bracket. Now, he wasn't even in the building. And it wasn't politics or snubs, it was performance. The brutal reality of darts is that it doesn't care about last year's trophies. If you're not winning now, you're out. Smith's rankings had plummeted so far that his name wasn't even in the conversation for automatic qualification. And wildcard picks? They went to players with momentum, players who were hungry, sharp, and healthy. For Smith, it wasn't just a professional blow, it was a personal one. The big nights under the lights, gone. The roar of the crowd, silence. Instead, it was qualifiers and early exits, far from the packed arenas where he once reigned. But while the fans saw the empty slots and brackets, they didn't see what it was doing to him on the inside. Being injured is one thing. Being forgotten? That hits different. As the losses mounted and the big stages faded, Michael Smith faced a challenge no ranking system could measure: the mental weight of watching everything he'd built start to crumble. He wasn't just out of form, he looked lost. On stage, his confidence was gone. His usual swagger replaced with frustration. Missed doubles weren't just misses, they were self-destruction. You could see it in his body language, in the way he carried himself during matches. The fight was still there, but the belief? That was fading fast. Commentators who once praised his resilience started questioning his focus. Former pros hinted that he wasn't the same player mentally, that the pressure of being at the top had finally broken through his defenses. And worst of all, fans began to turn. Online, people speculated that Smith had peaked, that his run was a fluke, that he couldn't handle being the man everyone wanted to beat. The irony? He'd spent years clawing his way up from being the underdog, and now, after finally becoming champion, he was slipping right back into that same role. Only this time, with more scars and fewer chances. But just when it seemed like the story was closing in on a sad ending, something unexpected happened. Just when the narrative looked written, a steep rise, a fast fall, and a quiet fade into the background, Michael Smith reminded everyone why you never count him out. In the spring of 2024, at a time when most had already moved on to the next rising star, Smith quietly won Players' Championship 9. No flashing headlines, no viral moment, just sharp, focused darts. It wasn't his biggest title, but it was a statement. He could still win. Then came something even more impressive. Teaming up with Luke Humphreys, Smith lifted the 2024 World Cup of Darts. It was his first televised title since the Worlds, and it mattered. Big time. Not just for the trophy, but for what it meant, that he could still perform on the biggest stage, under the brightest lights, against the best in the world. Fans started to take notice again. The doubters, a little quieter, the body language a little looser. He was smiling again, not the forced grin of someone pretending to be okay, but the look of a man who remembered why he started playing in the first place. Still, these weren't signs of a full return. Not yet. These moments felt more like sparks in the ashes than the start of a fire. But it was enough to shift the tone, enough to ask the question: was this the beginning of a comeback? Smith gave the answer in the months that followed. No. He lost in the first round of the World Grand Prix. At the Grand Slam of Darts, he was eliminated in the group stage, and at the Players' Championship Finals, he only made it to round 2. Not the results of a top player. He has not won a single title so far in 2025, neither on the floor nor on the European Tour. Right now, Michael Smith stands at a crossroads. He's not the top dog anymore. He's no longer the fresh face of darts or the new world #1. He's a former champion with battle scars, physical, mental, and emotional. But that might be exactly what makes his next chapter more interesting than the first. He's still only in his mid-30s. He still has the throw, the talent, the firepower. What he doesn't have right now is the momentum. And in darts, that's everything. But momentum can swing. It only takes one big run to flip the story all over again. The question is, can he do it? Can Michael Smith climb back from one of the sharpest declines in recent memory and remind the world that champions don't fade, they fight? Or was 2023 the peak, a brief window when everything aligned, only to close again just as fast? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Michael Smith isn't done yet. And if he does make it back, it's going to be one hell of a story. Michael Smith's rise was electric, his fall, sudden and brutal. But what makes his story so compelling isn't just the highs or the lows, it's the fight in between. He didn't vanish because he lost his talent. He didn't fade because he stopped caring. Life hit him hard, physically, emotionally, professionally. And still, he shows up. Still, he throws. Still, he believes there's more to come. In a sport where most careers are remembered for titles, Smith's might be remembered for something deeper, resilience. Because when you've been to the top and lost everything, what you do next says more about you than any trophy ever could. Maybe his best days are behind him. Or maybe the best comeback in darts hasn't even started yet.